They are so frustrated with our foreign military sales. They have purchased aircraft, fighter jets, F-16s, Apache helicopters, and other weapons and ammunition from us, and it's been constipated in this process of trying to get to them in a timely manner, because they certainly never foresaw the emergency crisis they would be in. But the fact of the matter is, our bureaucracy in providing them the equipment they desperately need has been shameful, to say the least.
The redrawing of national lines in Iraq has allegedly begun. Vladimir Putin has decided to get involved, and the Russian dictator is being seen as a savior by some on the ground in the Middle East. Buckle up, we're going in. Welcome back to Midpoint. Chief Analyst for LIGNET, the Langley Intelligence Group Network, former member of the CIA, Fred Fleitz, joins us today. Fred, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here, Ed.
I saw this today, and this was one of those things, you read the stories and it caught me. Iraq's Christians see Vladimir Putin as a savior. This on top of Russian jets and experts going to Iraq. Vladimir Putin just loves sticking his nose in places where sometimes it does or doesn't belong, doesn't he?
That's exactly right. Putin sees an opening here, and what he's doing is significantly advancing Russian interests in Syria and Iraq, in addition to the fact Russia wants to crack the arms sales problem to Middle East nations. They would love to resume being a large source of military hardware to Egypt. And basically Putin's saying, you can get weapons from us quickly. There's not going to be ethical and legislative problems that you have with American sales. And he came through. He sent 5 jets to the Syrians days after they requested them. They arrived by yesterday.
Did we expect this? Because let's face it, we know that Putin will do whatever he can to rebuke the United States at any time and basically step on us any chance he gets.
You know, Ed, we didn't expect it, but I also think it's important to keep this in perspective. These jets can be sent to Iraq, but Iraq reportedly does not have the pilots to fly them. Now, Iraq is also trying to get jets from Iran, jets that were flown to Iran in 1991 during the Iraq War. Most of them will be returned, but it's very questionable whether there's going to be pilots to fly them.
With regard to those pilots, I'm going to back up in a second. Is it fair to say that the Iraqi pilots flying these planes are just really inadequate for the type of planes that we would be sending them for and I'm trying to think of the phraseology here, but as technologically savvy as these planes are, that maybe they're above their heads?
Well, that's part of I mean, there's many reasons why the sale of advanced F-16 jets, that's what the United States is selling to Iraq. They're going to be getting 36 of them over the next 3 years. Part of the reason for the delay is that pilots have to be trained to fly these planes. They're very advanced. But even the older planes that they're requiring from Russia and Iran, these require experienced pilots with flight time, and that's something that Iraq lacks.
Why are the United States shipments to Iraq so inadequate and so slow?
Well, this is a question that has vexed many U.S. policymakers in foreign countries. We have a bureaucracy. These sales have to be vetted with the State Department and the Defense Department. I worked at the State Department. I've seen the thick bureaucracy these sales have to go through. Then they have to be approved by Congress. Now, one of the major sales is the sale of attack helicopters to Iraq. These have been put on hold because of objections by a number of U.S. senators. Now, these objections were lifted in January, but the helicopters will not start arriving until September, and those will only be used helicopters. New attack helicopters will not arrive in Iraq from the United States until 2017.
Fred, every time we get together and we start talking about calendars and we start talking about dates, we hear the administration and people saying, let's put some advisors there, let's try and at least help where they're going, let's try and do something. But then you and I have these discussions and we get to the honesty of the timelines. And don't we all of a sudden then have to come to the realization that there is little or nothing that can be done immediately, because this is a military operation that takes certain time and certain ways that you have to go about things. You can't just take 300 people, throw weapons at them and say, here, we'll solve everything in 3 weeks.
I think the United States could take quick action to solve the situation if it wanted to. We could quickly send jets and drones to the region to start attacking ISIS positions. In terms of sending jets and attack helicopters to Iraq, there are legitimate reasons why this can take time. I don't think it should take nearly as long as it's taking. But the U.S. Army could respond quickly if there was the political will in Washington for it to do so.
Political will in Washington. Ah, okay. Now we're talking about something entirely different here. I'm going to gloss over that for the moment because we all know where the political will discussion will get us. Let me discuss a little bit about what is going on right now. ISIS has declared basically a caliphate which stretches across Iraq and Syria. Is this again something that you would expect to happen? This is just the next linchpin, if you will, as they go ahead and try and create that state to make this announcement?
This was an objective of Osama bin Laden. It's always been the stated objective of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The fact that they declared this over the weekend, a caliphate that will extend across Iraq and Syria, isn't a surprise. They've taken border posts between both countries. What I'm concerned about is that they intend to push this caliphate even further into Jordan, Lebanon, probably into Israel. And recently, a lobbyist who works for the Iraqi government told me in Washington that ISIS may consider the island of Cyprus part of their proposed caliphate.
Is there anything being done then? Okay, let's take that on its face then, because now we're dealing with an entirely different situation here. We're dealing with a widening of their net. What is being done, or what can or what should be done, in your opinion, in LIGNET's opinion, to help stifle this before it actually becomes an issue?
We have to work with the Iraqi government to shore up their military. The air power is going to be a big help if they can get their Air Force together. They have a ragtag Air Force right now. That may take longer to get together. We need to organize their military so they can hold ground and take ground. But part of that has to be putting enormous pressure on the Iraqi government to make reforms to bring the Sunnis back into the political process. There won't be political support in the United States to help the Iraqi government if they're going to use these weapons to crack down on Sunnis. Sunnis will also be resentful if we're helping a regime that they think is cracking down on them. And what really troubles me about this, Ed, are recent reports over the weekend of new atrocities against Sunnis by Shiite militias over the weekend. This is something that's going to set back anything we plan to do to try to help stabilize Iraq.
When you talk about dealing with Iraq, though, you mentioned a number of other countries. You talked about Cyprus a moment ago. What about other countries? What about dealing with other countries, getting them involved, trying to at least stem this so that if indeed there is this proliferation of terrorists to other areas, that we're prepared for it? Because I will say this much, the one thing that keeps coming back in this whole argument is the Americans, in the minds of many, simply were not prepared, did not think about this, did not get themselves ready for the possibility of this, and they got caught off guard.
We should have a multilateral coalition, both with our European allies and with regional states, to fight the ISIS threat. I mean, that serves a number of purposes. First of all, it won't be the big bad Americans intervening again. And these nations all have military and intelligence capabilities that should be used to try to roll back this threat, because this is a regional threat. This isn't simply a threat to Iraq or to Syria. And in addition, this is a group that probably will be planning terrorist attacks far beyond their borders, probably against Europe and the United States in the future.
Do these other countries then have the political will, but also the strength of will to stand up to this group, to work with us? Do they even want to get involved with us at this point?
I believe there is political will among regional states. They are scared to death of ISIS. There's a problem in Europe. They also have intervention fatigue, just like we do in the United States. The French seem to be much more willing to get involved, and I think we could probably convince the British to get involved. Other European states, I think, will be more difficult, but it's something we have to work on.
Something interesting that came out over the weekend, too, according to the State Department, Martin Indyk, who was the special envoy for the United States. He was getting ready for a resumption of peace talks after a 3-year suspension. He resigned from his position as a special envoy. What does that say to us, Fred, if anything?
Secretary Kerry began Middle East peace talks with the Palestinians and the Israelis last July. They were supposed to have an interim settlement by the 29th of April. That day came and gone. Because the main reason is because neither side would cooperate. But in the end, Ed, this was an example of the Palestinians refusing to make significant and important concessions. The main one, recognizing Israel as a Jewish state. Now, the administration's trying to blame both sides. I blame the Obama administration for making repeated statements that put the blame for the failure of these talks on the Israeli government, which I think is untrue. I think Indyk just got fed up after the talks collapsed in April. And right now, there's no prospect that they're going to go anywhere.
He just threw up his hands. You get the feeling maybe that others would like to join him?
I don't think Middle East peace talks are impossible. I think an agreement someday could be reached between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But we have to put more pressure on the Palestinians and stop criticizing our friends. And we had created a situation here where we were letting the Palestinians get away with pretty outrageous and unhelpful statements, and then saying to the Israelis, if you don't agree to this agreement, more organizations and academics will start boycotting you. And the president said this, Secretary Kerry said that. I think the boycott is irresponsible. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but U.S. leaders should not be giving it any credence.
We will have to stop it there and come back again. Fred, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, my friend.
Good to be here.
For in-depth analysis and forecasting on the crisis in Iraq, as well as Martin Indyk, the U.S. Mideast Envoy stepping down, go to LIGNET.com. We do, and so should you. This is Midpoint, and every day we question everything.